Welcome back to another episode of our podcast, where we bring you the stories and experiences of accomplished legal professionals from around the world. Today, we are honored to have with us Mr. Pranshu Paul, a distinguished litigator and a legal scholar. Mr. Paul is currently a managing associate at Luthra and Luthra Law Offices, specializing in litigation across civil courts, arbitrations, and tribunals like the NCLAT. Alongside his litigation practice, he also has a smaller share of work in the corporate law. An accomplished academic, he earned his LL.M. in commercial and international law from the prestigious University of Cambridge, and his BA LLB honors were from the National Law University Delhi, where he was awarded the Vice Chancellor's Best Overall Student Award and multiple gold medals for academic excellence. With extensive experience in litigation, arbitration, and legal academia, Mr. Paul brings invaluable insights into the evolving landscape of dispute resolution and practicalities of career in law. In this episode, we'll explore his journey, the challenges of a litigation focused practice, and advice for aspiring lawyers. Let's welcome Mr. Pranshu Paul to the show. Hello, and welcome to Brief Encounters. It's an honor having you here. So let's begin with a question that we ask all our guests. Could you share what inspired your journey into law? Was it like a lifelong ambition or did it evolve over time?
Hi, first of all, thank you. The pleasure is all mine being on the podcast. With respect to your question, I think it's more of something that evolved over time. My father is a lawyer. So while I was growing up, I definitely saw him go to courts, not actually appearing in myself in courts or appearing or going to courts to observe him, but the discussions that he had at home and the discussions that he had with other people. So that definitely inclined me to move towards law. But it was also a process of elimination. I looked at other professions and the other career paths that one may have, and I eliminated those. And I thought that I wanted to do law and understood that law was slightly my better calling apart from the other professions. And having understood what entailed in law after seeing my father, I think that gave me the impetus to pursue law.
Wow, that's really great. So a little bit of inspiration from your father and a little bit of calculative thinking on your part led you to law.
Absolutely, because I think you can't make a career choice of what you want to do in a career of 20 years or 30 years or 40 years basis something as simple as just taking a wild guess or wild swing at it. You have to make some sort of a calculation and understand what you want to do. Because if you don't like what you're doing, and if you're pursuing a career for 30 years or 20 years or a long period of time, technically, then you'd get bored and you'd want to move out. And then moving out after doing something for 20 years can become challenging. So might as well start with something that you like.
That is very true. I mean, I hate the concept of getting to choose my streams and my career paths at the age of 15 when I'm in 10th grade. It's very scary because I barely know how to cross roads on my own. How do I decide on a career at that age? So I agree. That's very true.
No, I agree on that. As I understand, a lot of kids these days are looking at 10th and 12th, and right after 10th and 12th, they're looking at the factor that they want to move into law or they want to move into X or Y kind of a career path. And I understand that it can be quite confusing, but definitely the legal fraternity or the legal profession is a rewarding experience for anyone. That I can assure anybody who's thinking of moving towards law.
I think that's quite encouraging to hear. So, you began your BA LLB in NLU Delhi in 2010 when the institution was still in its formative years. What factors led you to choose NLU Delhi over the other NLUs, and how did being part of a relatively young institution influence your academic journey and overall experience?
So I joined NLU Delhi in 2010. So I was the third batch of NLU Delhi. The university definitely had trappings and bearings of becoming a good institution, but there were other factors that you could see. And one of the reasons why I made a very conscious choice of joining NLU Delhi, which was that it was near Delhi. So you had access and flexibility to go to courts in Delhi, to learn from lawyers, to attend conferences, to attend meetings. And that helps out throughout the 5 years of law experience that you have. Because just being in the classroom and not actually seeing the actual legal fraternity or meeting the legal fraternity or seeing courts, it does help to actually move towards them or to see them or to intern with them while you're in college. So that was another big reason. But you had people like Dr. Ranveer Singh and professors from various fields, including the Delhi University, coming to NLU Delhi to teach. So all of those factors led me to choose NLU Delhi.
Wow. I mean, Delhi is the legal capital of the country. Everything is there. So why leave the state? I agree with that.
Might as well take advantage of it.
Very true. Very true. So NLU Delhi is known for its renown in itself. Now it's one of the best, most premier law colleges in India. But you were a high achieving student even over there, earning a gold medal for consistent academic performance in school and the Vice Chancellor's Best Overall Student Award. Now, as mid-career professional, how do you reflect on the importance of academic excellence during school and college? Do grades actually matter in the end?
It depends on what you want to do for grades to matter. But the one thing I can assure everyone is that if not grades, but knowing the subject and just learning the subject properly while you're in law school helps to give you a head start while you're starting your legal career. Because while you're in the legal profession, you have to read and learn on a daily basis. And if you're not learning, then you're doing something wrong somewhere in the legal profession, but it gives you that slight head start to understand the subject slightly better or to know where to start with respect to a new case, with respect to a new field, with respect to a new law. And that gives you that advantage or edge. But apart from that, just being studious is not something that one should only aspire towards being in college. College is somewhere where you can experience a larger number of things. And I think everyone should just have a balanced life in terms of trying to do an experiment with everything, but you're there for a primary reason of learning. So that should never be put on the back burner.
That is very true. So, during your time at NLU Delhi, you were not just a great academic student, but you also participated in prestigious competitions, including winning the NLS International Arbitration Moot and the South Asia rounds of Lewis M. Brown Forrest International Client Consultation Competition. So, firstly, how did you balance your academic journey along with these extracurricular activities? And how did these experiences contribute to your professional?
So, to answer the second question first, they definitely help you understand because that's the closest that you can look at things in the real world. So, they try to emulate the real world courts or they try to emulate what would be happening in real world negotiations or client counselings. And they help you to get prepared for how this would be. Obviously, they can't be a substitute for what is the real court or a real negotiation or being there in a real client counseling. But they help you understand and to start off, like I said, just having that slight advantage of an edge to help you guide you in that direction helps out a large number of times. About balancing work in college and doing them, it's hard work. Yes, you have to balance both of them, but then in college you have a slightly better amount of time and helps you out in time management and learning time management better.
I think it prepares you for the future because you have to balance a lot of things. You can't solely just focus on academics.
No, I completely agree. Completely on that because if you'll be there in college for a very limited period of time as a student, if not further progressing into academia or pursuing academia, and you have that limited period of time to experiment with everything and understand whether you like it, whether you don't like it, and how the things work across colleges, how people are, how relationships are. And I think that's the only time that you have for that.
Right, right. So, post NLU Delhi, you began your career with a strong focus on litigation alongside a smaller share of corporate law. What drew you into this dual role? How do you manage the balance between? And what exactly made you choose litigation over corporate?
So, like I said, my father was a lawyer. So, growing up, I definitely saw a lot of discussions at home and outside in terms of courts and how the legal fraternity works. So, that drew me towards litigation. And that was one of my primary inspirations to move towards litigation. But the firm that I work at currently, I do a larger chunk of litigation, and it's unique in the manner that you do something new on a much more day-to-day basis. Yes, you would be focusing on cases for an extended period of time, but then when a new case comes in or a new issue comes in, you're looking at some other law, some other jurisdiction, some other court in a completely new manner all over again. It keeps your brain working, keeps you excited, and that's what makes the legal profession enjoyable.
That is the most exciting part. You're always meeting new things, doing new things, meeting new people. That's amazing to hear. So, you've had the opportunity to work with a lot of top tier firms like SAP and Luthra and Luthra. Could you share some of the most challenging aspects of these roles and the most rewarding aspect of them?
I think the challenging aspects of these roles would be time management. You have to learn and understand time management right when you're an associate up to the level of partner, everybody inside the firm. is keenly focusing on multiple tasks or multiple cases and with multiple clients on a day-to-day basis. So understanding and managing time is one of the most challenging tasks for everyone. But like I said, the most rewarding part will also be that you're handling multiple cases in multiple jurisdictions with multiple on multiple subjects at the same point of time. So keeps everything very exciting all the time. And I think one of the biggest rewards for me, at least at the confirm that I am, is I travel a lot in a lot of jurisdictions for work in domestically and so domestically when we're looking at cases, I'm not just doing cases in Delhi. I'm also doing cases in, for example, Bombay or Hyderabad or Calcutta or Jodhpur. So for all of those jurisdictions, you travel, you meet new people, you understand how the legal fraternity works there, and you meet other lawyers and you learn a lot from those people, which helps you to grow in your own career.
That does sound quite exciting. Now, sir, this is a personal question that I also wanted to ask, and it's something that I have discussed with a lot of my classmates back in college. We have heard of litigation, like the typical litigation route where people go to district courts and then from there they move on to higher court and then Supreme Court. And then now we're listening about litigation within the corporate field. What are the difference between the two, and which one, gives you a better insight into the litigation field as a whole?
I think both of them give you insights into the litigation field equally. I don't think that one can be placed above another in any manner. It's only mostly the clientele or the kind of law that you'll be looking at that differs in some cases or the other. To elaborate on this, in a more corporate oriented role, you would have companies who would have disputes, and those companies by themselves in those disputes would have certain specific laws that they'll be looking at. While if you're there with an individual lawyer or somebody who's practicing on in his chambers or a senior lawyer, they may have a different set or variety of cases, which would be on different jurisdictions, on different laws. So both of them have their equal side of exposure. Both of them have their equal importance, and you can't place one above the other. You have to understand what do you want to do and what do you want to get out of your career, or which path do you want to take in that sense.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So now that we focus on the LLM, transitioning from several years of core law firm work at Luthra and Luthra to pursuing an LLM at Cambridge must have been a significant shift. What motivated this decision, and how did you manage the transition from a professional environment to an intense academic setting?
So the difference was immense in terms of just going from your legal profession on a day-to-day basis to going to one of the best universities in the world. But the environment is, I think, the most challenging part of it. And that was the biggest change because at a firm, we are at a much more familiar environment where you know your roles, you know what you're expected out to do. While at the university, because you're pursuing the LLM, I'm not talking about the undergraduate program, they treat you in the manner that you're expected to come and be self-motivated yourself in terms of the readings, in terms of the classes, in terms of understanding what to do, and for you to gain the most out of the LLM. So you would have to approach the professors yourself in terms of the understanding of the subject to have a better understanding or deeper understanding of what they're trying to teach. If you don't do that self-sufficiency or self-motivation, then that takes away a lot from the master's degree itself. So I think that was the biggest difference that and challenge that came out to me that I had to be much more motivated all over again to do all of those tasks while at the master's program, while at the firm you have a slightly more specific set of roles of how you're expected to work and what you're expected to work, and you know your calendar on a day-to-day basis of how things will work out for you.
Right, right. So, what exactly motivated this decision to pursue an LLM at Cambridge?
The motivation was to understand to take a slightly better dive into academia. So I wanted to give one more shot into academia and understand into a better understanding of how the world in the legal fraternity thinks of approaching the legal subject. Because I've had only one style of schooling, which is in India. So I wanted an experience outside and understand how they look at law, how the academia looks at law there, and how well entrenched in terms of their understanding would be, or how do I develop that understanding through them or learn of the ways of understanding law through them.
That makes sense. So the Cambridge LLM application process is a bit distinct. If you could recall, could you walk us through your journey of navigating it? How did you approach drafting the different sections, especially the statement of interest, the reasons for applying, career goals? What key factors should applicants keep in mind?
So the Cambridge career process or the Cambridge application process is definitely distinct. They have a very specific number of things that they request from you. And because it's more high or more in focus towards academia, role or a career or a professional career will only constitute one part of your process, which would be your curriculum vitae that you're placing on record. But apart from that, they have a higher number of references that they look at, and the statement of reasons and the other motivation letters. They're all expected, or they all want to understand what do you want to do in academia first, because you'll be going there as a student. And then they want to understand further what would you want to get out of the LM and how would you use the LLM, which may be in your professional setting or elsewhere. But that's where I think is distinct from the other master's programs across the world, wherein they also have a focus that whether how much knowledge do you have before you come in and what is your career path after that. While Cambridge is not entirely focused on the latter, but focused on what do you want to do there at Cambridge in terms of academia rather than what you want to do after that.
I think that's quite interesting. Cambridge is trying to understand who you as a person and what you want to do at the institution. What role will they play in your legal journey? And that's a quite interesting way to go about the entire application process. So, how did you approach selecting your recommenders? As you mentioned, that references are extremely important. So, did you primarily rely on workplace references, or did you also include any academic recommendations?
So by the time I applied for my master's degree, I was already 5 years into the profession. So I made a mix of taking a professional reference, but also understanding that the Cambridge wanted to understand where my academic background was and what I wanted to do with respect to my academic progression at Cambridge. I took two of the references from my professors at college, which is and out of that, I think one of them is a mandatory requirement while at other colleges you can have all professional references. While if I remember correctly, Cambridge had a minimum of one academic reference, if not two, and they prefer two, if not three,
My God.
to show you the interest towards understanding your background in academia and what you want to get out of academia first, rather than understanding what your professional career has been.
So they do lay a lot of emphasis on the academy that you have pursued before the professional setting.
Correct. I think that's what is slightly distinct from other colleges or other universities.
Right. So for future LLM applicants, what advice would you offer on selecting the right university, managing finances, and navigating the competitive application process?
So to start with that, I think I'll first have to answer or make a assumption uh, and ask a question to anybody who's listening here that what do they want to achieve or get out of the. I think that's how you would select the university. If we are looking at primary goal of expanding your horizon in terms of academia, then certain universities would maybe preferred than other universities having programs in those universities. And going through all the university websites really helps because you can understand who are the professors, what departments do those professors work in, and what kind of a master's would you want to pursue. Whether do you want specific to learn through certain professors or learn about certain subjects, then those universities may be more preferred. While if you're more looking towards a career progression and using the LM as a springboard towards that career progression, for example, to move outside and to move to other jurisdictions, then other master's programs may be slightly more preferable. To elaborate on this, the UK has a more structured program in terms of how firms or lawyers or barristers are appointed or taken. While you can have the pupillage route and the tutelage route, also the firms may have the vacation schemes and individual lawyers may also have certain type of structured program. Other jurisdictions may not have such a structured program. So that may also count as factors for individuals to choose the university and the jurisdiction where they're also looking at, where they would want to or may want to practice or move into academy or choose a professional career after their masters.
Right. So, what was your navigation through the LLM process? Did you apply to a good number of universities, or was Cambridge one of the only ones universities you applied? What was your process like?
So I only applied to two universities at that point of time, and I only applied to Oxford and Cambridge. I was fortunate enough to be selected at both. And in those, the reason or the motivation for me to choose only those two was, I think, threefold. One would be because both those universities are based on common law. So India and common law having their similarities and having derived a lot of law from common law, I may get a better understanding of law. My second motivation would have been to go and expand my horizon, like I was mentioning before, about understanding law and how they perceive law and how they approach law, so that I can bring all of that and use all of that back in India when I'm trying to litigate or I'm trying to do things of how do I approach those certain subjects. And the third was the prestige of those two universities.
I mean, that doesn't need to be spoken. Oxford and Cambridge, just applying to those two, that requires a tremendous amount of confidence. And congratulations for getting accepted to both. That's wow. So, Cambridge is renowned for its rigorous academic environment and diverse student cohort. What was your initial impression of the university, and how did the experience differ from legal education in India?
So the approach, as I said, in legal education in India and at those two universities, or at least the university that I attended, is mostly about not just letting students look at certain subjects and understanding those limited amount of subjects, but giving them the freedom to delve deeper into the subject. Wherein in the master's program, they're given a lot of time that to understand or go deeper into the subject, but you have to be self-motivated to do that. And that's the biggest difference what I understood between those two, between India and pursuing academics outside. That you have to be a self-starter, you have to do your readings beforehand, you have to attend the classes while you're prepared. Otherwise, most of the discussions that happen in class, while it is not a lecture in terms of that this is the law and this is the section and this is going to be the outcome and this is the case law, it's more focused on a two-way discussion where the professors want to understand from you what do you think on this subject? What do you think on this particular section? What do you think on this particular case law? How do you think, was this the correct interpretation? Was this not the correct interpretation? Or how would you have approached the interpretation? So there it's more applied in terms of teaching, while if I look at the undergraduate program, and I think the undergraduate program would also differ in other programs outside as well, but it was more linear in their approach. While it was a one-way street, the masters or those universities have more of a two-way street kind of a teaching program.
Right.
So more Platonian or more Platoist, wherein they want to have a dialogue. And unless until you're having a dialogue in the class is not going about well. And just to add on to that, I think if you're also embarrassed in class, if you have not, and the pressure behind all of this is that you may be just embarrassed in class because you could be called upon at any point of time on what do you think on the subject or what do you think on this particular case which is being discussed. And if that is not, if you have not done your actual background work, or if you have not put in the effort to actually attend the class knowing what is being discussed, then it can also lead to embarrassments for individuals.
I think that motivates people to want to be aware of what's going on.
So apart from the embarrassment, I think that motivates everyone to know that you're there for a purpose. You're there to understand and learn, and you've chosen subjects. So at Cambridge, you can only choose four subjects in the LLM program. Out of the 40 odd courses that you're offered, you have to make a decision on four. You can audit classes, and you can audit classes for even the entirety of the year, but you would only get certification and you can give examinations in those four subjects. So once you have chosen and locked in your four subjects after the first semester, then it is expected out of you that you're there to learn those four subjects, so you're motivated enough to learn those four subjects. And you're not doing it only to go through the motions to just get the or pass the exam. And I think that's the biggest difference that you understand from the international cohort that comes here, there, that they're all very motivated to learn and they're all excited and passionate about the subjects that they're choosing instead of just going through the motion that this is part of my curriculum and I don't have any freedom and I have to give the exam for this to pass the bar exam, for example, in my 5 years of law school or in my 3 years of law school. But because you're choosing a subject, it's generally expected that you're more passionate about the subject and you want to learn. So therefore, the pressure and therefore the professors also putting further pressure that you can be called a call upon at any point of time.
Yeah, I've heard of the cold calls. That was a little scary part of LLMs, as people have told me. So, out of these four subjects, you have specialized in commercial and international law during your LLM at Cambridge. Could you share what drew you to these areas? Did you audit other classes, as you mentioned? And who were your favorite modules or professors during the program?
So I audited a lot of classes. I had my pick of classes out of the 40 subjects that I definitely knew I wanted. One of them, which I remember that was the scariest for me, was a class of advanced private law that was being taken by Dr. Sarah Worthington. And it goes to the root of certain concepts of law and the very complex issues of law. And the class originates not just around the subject that what is the law and what are the rulings, but like I was mentioning, that all of those are provided beforehand to you, and you're expected to read and learn and understand all of those rulings beforehand or the subject beforehand. But the class goes on to the questions of why this is being done, why was not this done, what is so special in certain areas of law, or what was the motivation in certain aspects for certain law to evolve in this manner. And that is where you understand this is how law evolves. And that was one of my challenging or the most challenging class that I attended, but it was also the most rewarding because the responses and the understanding that I take away from that class is unparalleled. But apart from all of those, apart from that class, I think I audited a lot of classes just to take the most out of the experience from Cambridge. And another mention class that I definitely want to mention is International Commercial Litigation by Professor Dr. Richard Fentiman. And his classes were not just enjoyable, but he had a control over his classes to the last second where he knew and could measure his sentences that if I and his measured approach to the class was absolutely something that I believe all litigators in India, if not arguing counsels outside, should just attend to learn and understand.
Wow, that sounds like a very exciting class. I think getting the opportunity to audit so many classes and getting a brief idea of these subjects, that's a very interesting way to go about an LLM. I mean, that's why Cambridge is what it is.
And if you're there, then you might as well want to take the advantage of it. Why not?
True, true.
And because you may not get the opportunity again to audit and meet professors of that stature, professors who have that clear understanding of law. And if you can audit their classes even for a short period of time, if not for the entire year, then might as well take advantage.
That is very true. So, Cambridge is renowned for its vibrant opportunities, including participation in societies, pro bono initiatives, and research groups. Were you able to engage in any of these during LLM, or did the challenges posed by COVID-19 limit such activities? How did the pandemic shape your experience at Cambridge?
So the pandemic definitely did have big impact on my entire experience. But I was fortunate enough to start my Cambridge experience in 2019 before the pandemic. And I got 2.5 good semesters at Cambridge before the pandemic hit. So before March 2020, I tried to involve myself in as many activities as time would permit or were accessible to me or something that would catch my interest, both at the college level and the university level. And that's what makes those kind of universities great. So to give you an example, the Cambridge is a collegiate system in which you have a college, you're part of a college and you're part of a faculty. I was definitely part of the faculty of law, but I was also part of Christ College. And Christ College in itself is a college which has its own dorms, which has its own activities, which has its own societies, which has its own boat club, and you have multiple activities that you could do in that college itself. So half the time would be spent in the college, some part of the time would be spent in the university activities, and the other remaining time, which was a much larger period of time, would be spent at the faculty itself.
Amazing. So, many students pursuing an LLM abroad aspire to gain international work experience post graduation. From your perspective, how do you view the UK job market for post LLM graduates? And what advice would you offer to those looking to secure international opportunities after completing their LLM there?
So the post-market situation differs from jurisdiction to jurisdiction because we're specifically talking about the UK at the moment. It's more of a structured intake process for a lot of the established legal services market in the UK, which would be both at a firm or if you want to pursue your career as a barrister or want to move into career of barristers or into an arguing counsel only rather than being a soliciting counsel. But also for individual lawyers, again, it's a more structured environment. So if I want to break it down into three parts, the easiest way for a fresher or a student who does not have any experience to move into a firm would be through a vacation scheme wherein you're absorbed into the firm. Because those firms, if not through a vacation scheme, or at least the larger firms, if not through a vacation scheme, find it difficult to gauge or to assess someone before they want to take that person. And if you're coming in from a country like India, only those kind of firms can actually allow you or support your visa to the extent that you can work there, if not the smaller firms. So that is definitely a disadvantage that you have because only the larger firms will be able to support your visa applications. With respect to a tutelage or going through the barrister program, that can be a separate long rigorous program in itself, which can also be very rewarding, but it has to be started well in advance. It can't be started at the last year, the minute you're trying to get into the LLM program. All of these things, if not for both the vacation scheme or trying to look at those bigger firms which can support your visa or going through a tutelage program, all of the applications end at least a year in advance. So if someone is looking at making or moving to a university in the UK, it would be better to go through those program websites, go through the different schemes, the vacation schemes, the other schemes, the tutelage programs, and look at their timelines and look at their deadlines and apply well in advance to understand how you can make the most out of if looking at a career in the UK.
Right. So according to your personal experience, why did you choose to come back to India and not continue working over there or getting some work experience in the UK?
So the primary goal was always to come back to India. The primary goal was never to work in the UK. I would have loved to have a short experience in the UK for a few months, but the goal was to come back to India, which was slightly accelerated by the COVID in March 2020.
Hmm.
So when COVID was hitting in March 2020, I had the option of either coming back to India or staying in the UK. And because it was so uncertain, I made the decision and elected to come back to India. And then it didn't seem feasible or reasonable for me to go back and apply and somebody to give me experience for 3 months or 4 months and ask them for a visa application or visa form and support my visa for 4 months. Then the commitment would have obviously been much longer, which I did not want to entail.
That totally makes sense. So let's talk about post LLM, having extensive litigation experience alongside corporate law practice, and now holding an LLM from Cambridge. How do you think global legal education has added value to your career, particularly in the corporate and in the courtroom?
So to break it down, before outside the courtroom, it helps you out because you understand the different global perspectives. And when I say different global perspectives, I mean the perspectives from your cohorts that you meet while you're at your college, while you're at your dorm, while you're at your hostel, while you're in the faculty, the different social events that you attend with them on a day-to-day basis. So understanding their perspective helps you understand perspectives in a global market. If you're looking at a more international environment, or if you're looking at a more international based career, or if you have foreign clientele in India, if you're looking at those kind of clientele. With respect to the courtroom, it helps you to sharpen your focus because once you've done this kind of academic program, it helps you to understand how do you, or a different way or perspective of approaching law. So it gives you a different perspective of approaching your case and gives you a different thinking of approaching a particular matter. And those may at times change the complete outlook of how that may be a better legal strategy or how that may be a better legal argument to make in court and frame your presentation in court better than without having done that. I'm not saying that this is something that lawyers in India would not be able to do otherwise. I'm just saying that this has given me a bit of an advantage in that kind of a thinking or in that kind of an approach being developed.
That makes sense. That makes sense. All right. So before we move on to more post LLM questions, there was one other question that I wanted to ask specifically with related to the application process. Now, considering that you applied to the two best universities in the world, Cambridge and Oxford, and got accepted into both, what were the secret tips and tricks that you used in your SOP specifically? How did you craft such a perfect SOP and the other requirements that they require for these colleges specifically that made them accept you?
So going about the SOP process will be slightly time taking because, and everyone should start in advance in terms of the SOP. I knew that, and because I was working at the point of time while I was making these applications, I had a bit of time in advance where I didn't have the urgency or need that if I don't do it this year, then nothing else or something will change for me. But having known about that and having chosen only to apply to two colleges, I took about 2 months or a month and a half to prepare my SOP, go through it over and over again. And when you start your SOP, I think the first question that you have to write down for your personal thought process is why. And they're also asking you why, but I think you need to ask yourself and be honest with yourself of why are you applying. And if you're not truthful to yourself, the answer that or what you want to tell them will not come out. And if something else in terms of a fabricated answer comes out or something that you only would want to showcase in terms of that this is a higher goal that I want to achieve or something else, a lot of those college application checkers, they go through thousands of applications. I think they can pick up something that somebody is doing it or writing only for the sake of the SOP very quickly or slightly better than others, if not very quickly. So being truthful to yourself is the first question that I think that everybody should ask. Why on that paper? Rewrite that question, just the word why a couple of times and think about it for a few days and list out the points of why, and why do you want to do it. I think everyone will come out with at least 4 or 5 answers to it. Once you have those 4 or 5 answers and you're being truthful to yourself and honest with yourself, then you can start structuring the SOP of how do you want to structure it. There's no set formula for structuring the SOP that you write your name and you do this and you do that and you list out these 5 things and that's done. Because along with the SOP, they're also going to look at your CV, they're also going to look at the other reasonings and your goals that you're putting forth. So you have to tie it all together. And you can't simply say that, and again, you can say if you're to be completely honest that you're doing corporate law, but you want to do something entirely different after the masters. But then you have to justify why do you want to do that. It can't be that you want to do A and nothing that you've ever done in your life ever supports that you want to do that A. Now, all of this has to be tied up with the why and being truthful enough with yourself or why do you want to do that. Once you have done that, then writing the SOP becomes simpler and structuring it becomes simpler. But I think the few questions that they're looking at in the SOP itself is your honest answer of why do you want to do this. But apart from that, they also want to understand who you are and what is your background and what are the circumstances and what are the things that you've achieved in those circumstances in that short one page. So writing down those few things on the side first along with the why helps out for you to pick out the best of the things that you would want to highlight. You may not want to highlight that you've done 20 modes, but you would want to highlight the best mode that you've done. I'm not saying that writing a mood code competition is a good thing or a bad thing in the SOP. That depends on how you want to structure it. But I'm giving an example that may not be the best thing, or but you would want to pick out the best out of the lot and how this ties up with what you would want to do. You can even say that you've been not again, not giving advice on what to write in the SOP itself, but if you've been experimenting with 50 things and you have become certain after those 50 things that you've done, debates you've done, moots, you have helped to organize a festival in college, you're part of a pro bono society in college, you're part of any other society, even the music society or any other society, or for a poetry society, or anything else that you like to do and you think out of those 50 things, yes, I like poetry the best from the poetry society or the time spent at the poetry society in college was the most rewarding and enriching for me, then put that in. But then you have to choose out of the lot what do you want to highlight in that short space covering all of that. And that's how I would recommend anybody go around with the SOP. But having said all of that, do start early, makes things easier for you. Writing an SOP in 1 week before the deadline, applications can be both stressful and you may not come out with something that you would want to write at the end of it.
I think that's some really, really great advice. And that's something that people should take into consideration when they're writing their SOPs. Take some time, understand who you are as a person, what you want to do there. I think that puts a confidence in the university as well for selecting you as a student.
And also, it gives you the reason why are you applying to that university as
Very
well.
true. Give some clarity to
Because once you ask yourself why, and you go through the university website and you understand that they don't have the course, or this is not the best university for this particular course, or to advance your understanding in a particular subject, then you may want to pivot to another university. And that may also help you choose and understand the different universities, the different programs, the different courses that are being offered, and make a better decision for what you want to do.
wow. That's something that people should keep in mind. So let's move on to the post LLM questions. What are your long-term career aspirations, and how do you envision your LLM contributing to these goals?
So, long-term career aspirations would be to try and excel in litigation as far as possible. The LLM helps you to understand, like I was saying, give you a better approach, both on a personal level and on a professional level in life. In understanding, for example, legal arguments and approach legal arguments, but also on a personal level, because going about in different parts of the world, meeting new people, learning different modes and means of studies, understanding how different people look at it, helps you pick up things, helps you understand things, and gives you a better perspective. And being in a lot of these colleges where there's a lot of competition, you have a lot of bright people coming in. You have a lot of very smart people coming in. Just interacting with them not only makes you humble enough to understand that there are far smarter people than you in the world, but also helps you understand a lot of their thought processes and gain things from them that you would otherwise not be able to do, apart from making your personal bonds and friendships with all of them.
Right. So this is a question that's very well debated, I believe, in the LLM versus the legal field. So for young lawyers contemplating whether to pursue an LLM immediately after graduation or gaining work experiences, what would you recommend based on your journey?
So there's no right or wrong answer to that. I think that's why there's so much of a debate in this. But it depends quite honestly on the career path that you would want to pursue. In terms of if you're looking at a career path in academia, for example, moving towards a master's immediately or soon after college may be better for you in terms of your career progression, depending on whether you want to pursue it further after the master's to a PhD or you want to go further into academia, and that may be helpful. Not just in terms of gaining knowledge, but also interacting with professors and learning from those professors, or even seeking opportunities with those professors, or seeking opportunities of academia at those universities or at different universities across the world. But if you're doing it only or solely for the reason that you would want a career progression outside of academia, then maybe both. You can do it right after college, but then again, your opportunities would be limited, and you have to understand this before you go for these masters. That if you have these foreign firms, then you would want to look at a vacation scheme with them. How would your visa requirements work out? And this is again a few considerations that are important for Indians if they want to move out of India and work outside of India. And lastly, about bar examinations, that how quickly or how soon would you want to give those bar examinations, whether they have other requirements, whether you can waive off certain bar examination requirements or not. So it's always preferred by everyone to have somebody who's seen a bit of law, who understands a bit of law, because everybody wants somebody with experience. But if your sole goal is to move out into a more international environment or to work outside of India, it might be better, considering that you've already made your applications in advance, or you're expecting results on the applications have already through to these applications, to actually pursue a LM immediately after college or not.
I think that's some great advice. So with this, we reached the last question. What message would you like to share with our listeners about pursuing higher education abroad and building a successful career in law?
So about I would there'll be a lot of things that I can say on this, but a few things I want to share on this would be if you're looking at pursuing higher education, do be truthful to yourself before you're pursuing that higher education, because there are several considerations to pursuing higher education outside of India specifically. And I think that is something that we've been focusing on this entire podcast. That there is a consideration of money, there's a consideration of your parents' money, your scholarships, or any other consideration which may be financial or non-financial. There may be considerations of whether you want to work outside or not, and there are visa requirements. And I'm being very realist about all of these requirements, and I understand that these are not things why or reasons why one should say yes or no immediately, but these are definitely considerations that everybody should have in their mind before they're looking at both jurisdictions, which is primarily or the most favored upon by Indians are at least the US or the UK, and how those financial and non-financial considerations work out, and what is your eventual goal.
Yeah.
And I think being truthful about your eventual goal helps you choose things in that manner. If you're not going to be truthful then of the fact that you want to work outside, then you may just choose in a master's immediately after college for a lot of students that I've seen, basis that on the frame that I want to do a master's outside. But why do you want to do it? What is your motivation? What do you want to do? That helps you later in life to understand that you're going to spend 1 to 2 years on something. Might as well do something that you would want to do or use forward in your life or in your career further, rather than just doing it for the sake that I want to do a master's outside. And
Yeah.
so that being said, about a successful career in law, I don't think I'm the right person or anywhere in my age to suggest about any successful career in law. And
I think
I
you're
feel,
being very humble for that. I think you're being very humble. Your journey is truly very inspiring. It was to me, it will be to the listeners. And I think the advice that you gave throughout this entire podcast, it was great. It was very honest. It was something that people don't usually mention. And thank you so much for that, genuinely.
and apart from all of this, I think if I can just elaborate on one thing to students or whosoever was listening this for the LLM programs, the life experience that you get from being outside of your own comfort zone in a different country and meeting a lot of people, different people from different backgrounds and cultures, is something that is immeasurable. Don't measure that in terms of financial worth or the gain that you would get in your career solely on the fact that this is just something immeasurable. You cannot measure those experiences and you cannot measure the lifelong bonds or the friendships that you're going to make out of that. So don't consider that as a stepping stone or a ladder or something that, yes, that's a tick in the box. But a master's, do have that at the back of your head that if you're going to do a master's, then that is something that you should enjoy upon or you should definitely look at instead of just doing the master's only for the sole reason of A or B.
Thank you so much for that. That brings us to the end of this episode of Brief Encounters. I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to you from Project LLM for sharing such valuable insights and experiences, for being so honest, and for telling us the true reality of how things are and how they go about. It was amazing having you on the podcast.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We hope you found today's discussion as enlightening as I did. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow and leave us a comment. Thank you so much.